So, as of the time I am recording this, BFDI has just turned 14 years old. And over the years, a lot of fan object shows have been made. Some really good, and some...
I know I'm going to get lots of to come.
And over the years, I've also watched a lot of these fan shows. So one day, I was thinking of content ideas, and I thought, hey, why not rank all the shows I've watched? So this is every object show I've watched ranked. Okay, this is a pretty popular show, so I realize I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but my pick is 50th Place Object Mayhem. I realize this show is pretty popular, but I don't really understand why. The show is really boring. I watched all of the episodes and I couldn't get into it. The jokes are not that great, and the characters are really boring. Like, the debuters are the best, except for that one mailbox person who I didn't even know existed until like a day ago. Also, this intro. I can say that the show got a little bit better towards the end, but that doesn't justify me putting it any higher in my ranking, and it especially bugs me that the show got cancelled so close to the end of it. I'm going to choose a best episode for every object show I put on this list, and for Object Mayhem, I think the best episode is Just Keep Running. No reason in particular, except I just found it the least bad. Okay, so I don't know if this really counts because it's a joke show, but I'm adding Battle for the Money Island at 49th. It's a funny joke show, but compared to other object shows, it's I don't have too much to say about this, but I'm going to say that the best episode is episode 11, the finale, The Darkest Twist of BFDI, because it had somewhat good animation and it was the most entertaining. It's another joke show. I feel like this one is slightly better than Battle for the Money Island. It was also one of the first joke shows, so I think that's pretty cool. Overall, the show's pretty funny and it's a good joke show. Compared to other object shows, it's bad, but I would recommend it as a joke show. Overall, the finale is the best episode of the show. The joke at the end is really funny, which is probably the only reason it's higher than Battle for the Money Island. Okay, so the next episode on this list is Object Environment, but that's my show, so I don't feel like I can give a fair review of it, so if you want, you can check it out to see for yourself. Finally, a proper object show that I can talk about. The Start Calling Nice Object Show was a pretty popular show when it released in 2021, however it only had one episode. I will list the pros and the cons. The pros is 1, the animation. It has absolutely stunning animation, the visuals are really good. Most of the characters are also pretty funny, and the humour is polished, which makes it a fun show to watch. The cons are the episode. It only got one episode, which was only 3 minutes long, which makes the show feel kind of pointless. Also, Airhorn and Hammer didn't really do anything. Since there's only one episode, I can't really talk about it.
I kind of wanted to say this, but you're the best friend I could ever have, and you always stay on my side. Here's one last gift.
It's a Flipper Clip show. That's pretty cool. Anyways, I'm going to try not talk about the part in Object Enable and just talk about the rest of it. One of the pros is the animation, which is really impressive for Flipper Clip. Although there are better animated Flipper Clip shows later down the list, it is still pretty impressive. However, this show is held down by the fact that it's basically as generic as a show can get. There's nothing that really makes it stand out ahead of any other object show. For most of the series, Red Ball and Yo-Yo were the only interesting contestants. Although we barely got to see any of the challenge, I think that episode 11A, the newest episode, is the best one yet. The animation really sticks out and the character interaction is at its best.
I want a vacation and a beach house. I want my contestants back from you.
A pretty controversial show, Level Up was a recently released show which was cancelled after 3 episodes. While the show had pretty good animation and a good concept, it had its weird parts. The show had a good concept and pretty good cast, which could have been handled a lot better, and it's unfortunate that it was cancelled. Best episode was episode 2, Mean Comment Mania, because it had a pretty interesting concept with decent handling. Not too much to say here, so let's just move on. Short but sweet would be a good way to describe this show. Epic Object Show is a recently released object show which, guess what, only has had 1 episode so far. It proved to be a simple yet charming show with a really good art style and really great characters in its 1 episode, and I'd like to see more of it as the show progresses. Since it only has 1 episode, I'll list the pros and cons. The pros is it does a good job introducing the show in only 3 minutes. I guess the teams are interesting. It's cool to see it having a small cast and only 3 members per team. The cons are it can feel a bit generic and empty at some points. It's not as bad as some other shows, but it's still there. Another show with a lot of charm, BFDI Weekly starts off a bit shabby at the start, but gets a lot better towards the end. It does a good job at replicating the old BFDI style, and it especially does good in the early episodes where they manage to make entertaining episodes out of reused lines. The show manages to do a really good job at character development, which BFDI failed at for some of these characters, and character interaction. One of my problems with it is that some parts feel a bit messy. Like 1 episode they randomly added Cloudy for like 2 episodes and removed him, so okay. And then everyone decided he should rejoin, even though he was probably the least deserving of rejoining. So yeah, a lot of the earlier episodes of the show are quite messy, but it does get fixed a bit towards the later half. So overall, it's just a fun show that I'd recommend watching if you like the early object show style. A lot of the episodes kind of blend together a lot, so I don't really have a favourite. I guess the best one would probably be episode 1 of the remaster, because it was probably the highest quality episode. Rice. I've got to say, this is a very generic object show, probably as generic as it gets. It has good writing and a good concept, but bad execution. I guess one of the reasons it's so brought down for me is the lack of voice acting. It makes the show feel very empty, along with the weird music choices. This is a show I have very little to say about. The best episode is probably episode 2 of season 2, so I'll just move on. Another show with a classic style. I'm actually really starting to enjoy Fight of recommended characters, and I'm quite excited for the next few episodes to come out. It's a good classical show with an interesting cast and a lot of potential. I really love the setting for some reason. It feels so generic, but also really interesting at the same time. Amethyst was robbed, #justice for Amethyst. It's hard to decide which episode was the best because both of them were good in their own ways, but I decided to give the edge to episode 1 because I found it a little more interesting with the voting and the start scene with all of the characters. I never really cared for Abe. I tried to watch it 3 times, and 2 of the times I stopped halfway through episode 1 because I wasn't enjoying it. But I decided to push through and watch the whole thing, and to be honest, it didn't really get any better. For one, the setting is kind of weird. It's quite unique compared to the other Grassland style, but something about it just doesn't feel right for me. The show has a lot of characters, but unlike some object shows that are higher up on the list that do this well, I don't feel like Abe pays enough attention to some of them, and a lot of them just seem really boring or unlikable. Also, I really don't like the humour of the show. So I've got all that out of the way, so I'll list some positives. The show's art style is pretty cool and the animation style is unique and fun. The show's animation and character designs are pleasant to watch, and that's something that can be really good for an object show. Also, the voice acting is pretty good, which is quite unusual for shows. The best episode is the first one because I found the challenge to be pretty entertaining, and I feel like it does a pretty good job of introducing all of the characters. So this is probably the most average object show on the list. This show is very nostalgic for me as it was the second object show I ever watched. But looking back, it's definitely a good show, don't get that wrong. It was definitely amazing for its time compared to BFDI and Inanimate Insanity, but I don't think it holds up as well nowadays. It has the same issue as a lot of other shows, as in it's quite a generic one. It's a fun show with a quirky but sometimes stereotypical cast. But it's a high quality show and it's definitely a staple of the object show community. I would definitely recommend a watch of it. I would say that the best episode is episode 1 of the remaster, as it has the highest quality and it's a pretty fun watch. It does a good job in reintroducing all of the characters and it's a fun episode. Showvember, again, is a weird case of an object show. It doesn't feel like a show that I can really rate because all of the episodes and characters are really inconsistent. But I'll try my best anyways. The show feels a bit worse than the original. The characters I feel are worse. The episodes are usually short or less entertaining, and some of them don't even feel like they have challenges, just weird character interactions. There's the occasional pretty good episode, but the rest of it is usually just pretty mediocre. As for the best episode, I'll just go for 4. It was just the highest quality and most entertaining, I think, and the elimination was kind of cool. It's another Flip-A-Clip show! Yay! This is actually one of the most popular object shows out there, which is kind of confusing. I get animation object shows a pretty big creator in the OSC, but it's still kind of weird. As for the show itself, it's alright. It's another generic object show, but I feel it does a little better than other ones. The animation's not stunning, but it's good for a Flip-A-Clip show. It has a bit of a rough start, but it definitely got better over time, and the newest episode is especially really good. Overall, another generic show, but with a lot more pros, which puts it up a lot. And it should be obvious that the best episode is the newest episode, episode 8, because it had the highest quality and best plot. After Schooligans, a show kinda spoiled by its creator, but nonetheless an alright show. First time I watched it, I thought it was revolutionary for the object show community and one of the best shows out there. In total, due to its cancellation, it got 11 minutes of screen time, making it one of the shortest shows on this list. It's not necessarily bad, but I feel like the second episode was quite mediocre and wasn't worth the wait, and the first episode was alright. Speaking of which, the best episode was episode 1, because it did a good job introducing all of the characters, and I guess it just had a fun feel. It's the first season of BFDI on this list. I've decided to separate pre-split and post-split because they're both very different and have very ranging qualities. But yeah, this is definitely the worst season of BFDI. To start off, the animation throughout the first half of the season is really clunky. It's so obvious that they hired a bunch of animators because And now I'll give you the list of good characters this season. Lollipop and Ruby. Almost all of the characters became really annoying, obnoxious, or got very little screen time in this season. The show does have some good episodes though. BFB 21, 22, 24 and 28 all come to mind, but the show has some absolutely awful episodes. BFB 17, 18, 19 and 20 are all some of the worst episodes of the entire show. Same with BFB 25, 26 and 27. Overall, post-split wasn't exactly bad, well it wasn't good either, but it was a massive disappointment. Unpopular opinion, but I think the best one is BFB 21. Felt the most like a casual BFDI episode. It was fun, the character interactions were pretty good, and it was overall just a fun episode. Not too serious like BFB 22, but not too ridiculous like BFB 20.
Oh, so this is where my sleep paralysis demon takes me in my dreams.
I'm just going to say that the Daily Object Show is a tad bit overrated. It's impressive that all the episodes are made in one day, but I feel it's not as good as anyone says. The show is definitely good though, the animation style is really cool, it has a lot of good characters, and it's a breath of fresh air from very generic object shows. I would say this season's vary in quality a bit, like there's some seasons that I don't even remember and some seasons that are really iconic. Like, I do not remember this season at all, but I absolutely loved this one. Speaking of which, since the episodes in this one are really short, I'm instead going to be ranking which season I thought was best, which I think is Daily Dash. The duo dynamic is nice and the concept was pretty cool too. The characters in this one are also a lot better than some of the other seasons. TDOS Real Life and TDOS All Stars are also pretty good. Okay, Exford. This is a really underrated show actually, I've never really heard anyone talk about it, so if you like the non-competition show format then you should definitely check this out. Also, it was animated on IBIS Paint. Holy crap, that's good. I don't really want to go into depth about the plot of this episode because I think it's really worth a watch, but I'm just going to talk about my personal opinions of it. So, you may be thinking, I've talked about how impressive and creative the show is, so why isn't it higher? It's only 31st on my list. Most of why I put this low is because of my personal opinion, but you might really like it and put it really high, or you might really hate it and put it low. How much someone likes a show will definitely be based on how the animation style is to them and how the concept is to them. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the realistic eye and human features of the characters, but I can see why someone might like it. The plot, I guess, is also just not really my thing, but even with all that said, you should definitely check out the show. It's really creative and impressive, and I only had one episode, so the best episode is episode 1, and so baseball did it. Invitational is a weird one for me because I feel like I like it, but the more I think about it, I don't like it. I mean, Inanimate Insanity Season 1 had a bit of a rough start, but it had a lot of charm and gets good at the later half, and Inanimate Insanity Season 2 has a good plot and emotional depth. But I don't really know what Inanimate Insanity 3 has. The whole season just feels a bit messy to me, especially episodes 15 to 18. The season was really good from around about episodes 4 to 8, and it just kind of started going downhill from there. I do have to admit, the animation and style is at its best here, and the storytelling is pretty good. It just doesn't really do it for me. I'll list some of my problems with episodes 15 to 18. Start off with the rejoin challenge is kind of confusing in how it works, and then Blueberry just rejoins by faking his death. Okay. And then they eliminate him in the very next episode, which just feels really filler. Next one, Nobody Gets Immunity, which feels really awkward, especially for a final challenge. And then we've got our final 3, which is a pretty good final 3, I'll admit. But then the finale. The start of it's kind of fine, but then literally every single character that's appeared before suddenly just appears back to try and fight Miphone. It just feels kind of weird and just doesn't do it for me. And then the whole thing with Silver and Candle just feels really bad and rushed. Overall, it's a mediocre season that didn't live up to season 2, and with a little more planning could have been a lot better. I'm conflicted over whether 7 or 8 is the best episode, but I'm inching more towards 8 because it had a cooler concept and the thing with Bot is pretty good. Object Madness is an interesting one because it's one of the first ones that introduces world building. Instead of the objects living in an infinite plane, D1 reference, they live in a kind of like town area, and they get to the place using a bus that explodes. The show's kind of a weird one for me. For starters, it copies some BFDI characters like Tennis Ball, Nickel, and Puffball, which is interesting. Not saying it was a bad idea, it's just it was kind of weird. I'm going to say that the animation is really good in this show, although you can probably see why. Spending that long to make an episode could be a bad thing, as it's harder to connect with the show with how little other episodes come out. Although it does end up making the show pretty good and having a good attention to detail, so I can't complain about that. I had a hard time deciding whether episode 1 or 2 was the best episode, as both were good in their own ways, but I feel I would have to give the edge to episode 1 because it's more iconic and I feel like the starting bit really pulls it up a lot. Back to Inanimate Insanity again, but yeah, season 1 is slightly better than season 3. I just slightly prefer the simplicity and charm of the first season. Although I have to say, episodes 1 to 5 were pretty bad, it gets a lot better over time and it's really good after the 10th episode. It's also one of the rare cases where a finale actually works for an object show. I find it to be one of the best episodes of the entire series. Speaking of which, I also slightly preferred episodes 17 to 18, just because of all the stuff at the start, and I thought the start of it was pretty intense and pretty fun to watch. Episodes 9, 15, 16, and 18 all also stand out as really good episodes. Moving forward, all of the shows on this list will start to be really good, and Discord Emoji All-Stars is a perfect example of this. It follows the basic competition format but still manages to be such a unique show. In just one episode it already got me really interested in the setting, host and the cast. Speaking of which, the cast has some of the most unique characters I've seen in any object show. Seriously, they're just so fun to watch and seeing them interact with each other is just perfect. What I find a lot of modern objects just struggle with is getting a good host and they all feel like bland or generic, but Discord Emoji All-Stars does not suffer from that and the host is really funny. I'd also like to point out that the aesthetic of the show, specifically the background, is really nice to look at. Characters and aesthetic aside, the only problem I have with it is the challenge and the overall plot just feels kind of generic. It's not too much of a problem here, it just knocks it down maybe 1 or 2 spots. Of course, the show's only had 1 episode so far, so I have to put episode 1 as the best. And we're finally at BFB Pre-Split. This is a lot of people's first impression of object shows, and a lot of people think it's the best, so you're probably wondering why I put it in the bottom half. I personally think episodes 1 to 9 were pretty mediocre and boring, with a few exceptions like episode 6, but after episode 10 is where it really started to shine. 10 to 12 are all really good in character interaction, plot, and overall entertaining. But the Lava Trio of episodes are some of the most peak object show episodes that I've ever watched. Seriously, everything about them, the character interaction, the dynamics, the arcs, even the challenge, everything about it is just so fun to watch. So after this amazing trio of episodes, how do they top it off? They split the show. Yay! The season is really brought up by episodes 10 to 15, but episodes 1 to 9 and the BFB 16 that we don't speak about really pull it down a lot from its potential. And it should be no surprise that BFB 14 is my highest rated episode. Seriously, this might be the best object show episode ever released. The lava stuff is really cool, same with the book, pin and taco stuff. Characters like Woody and Barfbag were at their peak here. Everything about this is just such an amazing episode. We're finally halfway through, and what better way to celebrate that than talking about Showbember? Possibly the most interesting concept for an object show out there. It manages to be really funny, and somehow a lot of the characters are really consistent, even with how it's made. It's also very funny how many old object show creators who had quit came back just to make a Showbember episode. If you're looking for a non-serious, funny show that you just want to enjoy, definitely watch this. I rewatch it a lot because of how short and sweet it is. It does kind of get brought down because of how inconsistent it is and because it's completely impossible to create an arc that doesn't last 1 episode, but it's still fun to watch nonetheless. I think middle of the list is a perfect place for this show to be. Even though a lot of the episodes are intentionally bad, there's a few good ones and it's quite hard to decide the best one, but episode 9 had a good art style, was funny and was really well animated, so I'll have to go with that, although it's close between that one, 1 and 7. Okay, so now it's time to talk about, oh my god. So I guess not many people have heard of this show, which is a real shame because it's one of the best object shows I've ever seen. I mean, the only reason it's at 24 is because it's only had 1 episode to prove itself. But yeah, this show deserves much more attention than it gets, so please make sure to watch it sometime. There's a lot of things that I want to say about this show, so I'll just get started. First of all, this show has some of the coolest characters out of any object show I've ever seen, if not the coolest. There's so many characters that have such a unique concept and have such great personalities that have proven themselves in just one episode to be some of the best out there. Here are some of the characters who I think are some of the coolest and best of the show, and that's not even all of them. There's still a lot more who I find really interesting. What's even better about the characters is how real they are. They all seem to interact like real humans, and that's something that's really special about the show, including the host, who I think is one of the best object show hosts up to date. Our introduction to the show already told me that I was going to love this show. It gives sort of one vibe without the contestants being trapping. The aesthetic and setting of the show are also really good too. But anyways, I think I've said all I need to say. There's only one episode, so that one's the best. Make sure to check the show out. Yet another game show is, well, yet another game show. But I managed just to do this trope well. It has a relatively small cast of contestants so that you can get to know them all a lot better, especially if the equal division is screen time. KSSU for the win. I really enjoy the challenges that this show has to offer. They all seem really fun and unique, and they're all really cool to watch. I think that's one of the things this show does best out of any show. I watched the whole thing in one go, and it's cool how you can gradually see the episodes get better and better as time goes on. Don't get me wrong, the start of the show was still pretty good, but if every episode was the same quality as the first episode, the show would be somewhere in the 30s of this lit. It's cool to see things gradually getting better, like the animation, the writing, and even the character interaction. Marble is a vampire for some reason. Like how I was wishing that the episodes got better and better. The best episode is the most recent one, two of a kind. It really shows how good this show can be, and when it reaches the finals, the character interaction is at its peak. Greeny's Grand Game was one of the shows that I had the most fun watching. If you've just watched one and are now depressed, then I'd recommend watching this straight away. The show's just got such a vibrant and fun feel, and the humour is really great. It's got so many characters that make them all really funny. I'm also obsessed with the overall aesthetic of the show. The character designs are really cool and the backgrounds are stunning. The animation, while sometimes clunky, is still pretty nice to watch. One nitpick I have of the show is it's kind of hard to get into. It doesn't focus on the story or character arcs at all and more focuses on just the humour. While I do realise that it's a joke show and it's obvious it's going to be like that, it'd be still cool to have some story/character dynamics added to the show later on. Best episode is probably episode 1. The more content that's in this episode due to the higher length lets you appreciate all the characters more. I've always appreciated slice-of-life type object shows. Even though I prefer competition shows that follow the Survivor viewer voting format, these types of shows are always the best. Modern Objects is one of the first shows I've seen that's gotten popular using this type of style, which is definitely good. Modern Objects is one of the shows that you should definitely watch if you want to make a show of this style. It's a good basis on what one of these shows should be. It's got a distinct art style and a simple cast size which keeps it all interesting. As much as I want an episode 2, it works well as a standalone episode 1. It establishes the cast, has a clear and fun and entertaining plot, and has a satisfying ending. What more could you want from an object show? For the reasons I just established, I think it only has one episode. The first episode is the best episode. And with all of this established, I think this placement in the list is a good place for it. Open source objects is such a great way to start off the top 20. All of the shows from this point onwards will be absolutely amazing, and this one is no exception. Before I watched Open Source Objects, if you told me that there was going to be a show made by hundreds of animators, all with their own distinct art styles, I just thought it would be messy and chaotic. And you know what? It is messy and chaotic, but in a good way. The show just feels so chill and vibrant. It has a good set of characters, a nice host, and a really cool setting. Don't look at that. It almost feels like something I would watch as a kid, and also the contestants are treated pretty nicely. When they're eliminated, they just have to walk out instead of being sent to some box to suffer for 2 years. I do feel like the show is becoming a bit more boring. I mean, I wish they added something new to spice it up, because I feel like a lot of the new episodes aren't very special or memorable. The newer episodes are still good, but they're not nearly on the level as the first 4. Of course, there is quite a bit of a wait between each episode, but with how hard it must be to manage such a big crew, it's understandable. It's honestly really close which episode is the best. I'm leaning towards 2 or 4, but I settled on 4, because I like how the characters are more interacting in this episode better than in episode 2. I always feel like the challenge is done more interesting. Community Venture is a fairly underrated and new show, which is also a slice of life show. I think it barely edges out Modern Objects based on the aesthetic, because I really like that in this show, and the potential. They've both only had 1 episode, but the difference is one of them is still getting episodes. Anyways, aside from Modern Objects, the characters in this show are really cool. They're definitely some of the most unique characters I've seen, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but the character interactions in this are written perfectly. I also think it does good at world building, sets out where the characters live, a few different locations, and overall all these places are really nice. The setting's pretty unique. It doesn't just take place in one area, it takes place in a variety of areas following different subplots. And I think those are just some of the reasons that set this show aside from other shows like it. It's a really fun and chill show, and if you're looking for something different, I'd definitely check it out. It's only had 1 episode so far, so that one's the best. Now, I love BFDIA and all that, but what the hell is this? One of my big issues with BFDIA is the recent episodes. They seem to have no idea what BFDIA actually was and just thought it was some goofy, silly 2013 crap. Which is a shame, because BFDIA was always my favourite for being the more serious and edgy sequel to BFDI. And seeing some of the newer episodes go so downhill and just flat out mediocre is a shame, because when I was starting the production of this video, BFDIA was in my top 5, and it's slowly gone down ever since. But BFDIA 5 and also BFDIA 6, I guess, really pull the series up for me. Honestly, the first 4 episodes, 2 and maybe 4 are the only good ones. BFDIA 1 was way too rushed and didn't even introduce some of the characters, and BFDIA 3 felt really empty and just like a filler episode. I also think BFDIA 2 is one of the best episodes of the season and is definitely not given enough credit. It introduces going to Yoil Land as not just part of a gag, and it's a huge step up from season 1. And don't even mention the start of Evil Leafy, which is one of the best parts of the whole season. BFDIA 4 is pretty good too, it's just kind of weird, and especially with the music choices and stuff. BFDIA 5 is definitely the best part of the whole season, maybe even the best part of the whole show. It even has a game as one of the episodes. You can't get more unique than that. BFDIA 6 is pretty cool too. It's fun seeing all the teams interact after a while, and seeing Yoil City is really cool too. And then it all goes downhill. BFDIA 7 is pretty boring and mediocre. BFDIA 8 ditches the whole Yoil Land thing, and BFDIA 9 is just BFDIA 9. I really hope that they can get the series back on track, otherwise it's going to drop a lot more spots in my ranking. Best episode of the show is clearly BFDIA 5, but which part is the best? Well, it's not BFDIA 5B. It had pretty bad execution, and I think it could have done a lot better, especially as the only video game entry on this list. BFDIA C and D were also kinda weird. They're not bad in any way, although some people might say they are. They're just not as good as the other parts. BFDIA 5E introduces Yoil City and has a really cool puffball scene at the end, but I have to give it to BFDIA 5A, just because I feel like it's more unique and entertaining to watch, especially with the elimination. Now we're getting into the seriously good shows, and Love of the Sun is one of the most interesting shows I've ever watched. Also, everything from the character designs to the colour scheme and even the naming of things is really cool. It's also got the perfect mix of comedy where it's not too up in your face and it's not too oftenly used, but when it is used it's really good. Also, the concept. The idea of a show that follows where objects go where they die and before they're recovered is actually so interesting, and I'm surprised that no one's thought of it before. And I'm really happy that this show doesn't do this to show where objects go when they die. The show's pilot does an amazing job at introducing the cast, the setting, and the lore behind the show. It's honestly one of the best object show pilots I've ever watched. This is also one of those object shows where it feels like this doesn't have to be an object show. If you replace these with human characters, it would work just as well, maybe with a few minor tweaks. Also, I can't get enough of how much I like the aesthetic, especially the lighting. It just works so well and it's really nice to watch. As of now, there's only one episode, but there's a new one coming this month, so as of the time this releases, it will probably be out. As of this, I have nothing else to say. Episode 1A is the best. Teapot, teapot, teapot. Where do I begin? It's probably the most popular object show as of right now. And for good reason, as although it's had its ups and downs, it's overall a really good show and one of the best seasons of BFDI. When I started making this list, Teapot was going through a kind of dark days period where a lot of the episodes weren't very good and felt kind of rushed. But Teapot 7, even though I didn't particularly like it that much, really brought the series back in writing quality, and Teapot 9 really shows that. Teapot 2 and 9 are probably some of the best episodes of the whole series. Teapot 7, 5, and 1 I think are also really good. The show kind of has an identity problem where it really doesn't know what it wants to be. A serious, well-written show, or a funny, chill season just like BFDI. But I feel like it's kind of figured it out now. And I think it's a mix between both. It doesn't have to be really amazingly written for it to be enjoyable. 2 is one of the best hosts in BFDI history, only being beaten by the original announcer. He's just so nice to the contestants, which is a big step up from 4. The animation is also at its peak here. Animation in object shows doesn't get much better than this. I really like how they started to develop some of the characters, such as Gaty and TV, who had little to no role in BFB. I also love the Eraser and Teardrop rivalry. Rest in peace that as of Teapot 9. I'm glad that because of this, BFDI is finally becoming a well-known show. Teapot 9 is definitely the best episode. The way the characters interact in this and how interesting and unique the challenge was just makes it a really good episode, especially with the Gaty scene shown right now. So I know about 90% of you are thinking, what the hell is Zero and what makes it better than Teapot? Well, the thing is, this is actually the least viewed object show on the list. Well, besides. Which is actually a really big shame because it's an underrated gem in the object show community. It's another friend group show like GGG and Burger Brawl, but I feel like it's done really well here. It's a perfect match of comedy and story, and all the characters are actually well written. The designs are great, the aesthetic is cool, and the first challenge does a really good job at introducing the competition. The characters flow so nicely, and their character dynamics and interaction is really good. The Void is also one of the best object show hosts I've ever seen. His monotone personality is just so fun to watch. The second episode is coming out really soon, which I'm very hyped for. If you haven't already, please go watch this show. Of course, only one episode, so that one's the best. Now, out of the 4 friend group shows I've seen, all of them are pretty good in their own ways, and when I first made this list, I thought that this one would probably win, but I just have to put this other one right in front of it. Finally a good object show that's made by a non-controversial, oh for goodness sake! So I'm going to say that before the drama, Burger Brawl is my favourite show of all time. So this would probably be first on the list if not for the situation. But it just doesn't feel right to put it here after what's happened. Still, I'm going to try and separate the art from the artist here and talk about it from a non-biased standpoint. Burger Brawl is probably the most impressive show on this list, considering it was animated on Flip-A-Clip. The show gets really smooth at its later stages, and most of the episodes were made in under a week, which is seriously impressive from someone who used to use Flip-A-Clip. Also, the show's humour is golden. It's one of the few object shows that can make me burst out laughing in almost all of its episodes. According to Jerry, some of the first few episodes weren't even scripted, which is really impressive how he managed to make a good story out of that. The show also has some of my favourite object show characters ever, such as Cole, Cram, Never, and Razu. The show is not afraid to swear and put in edgy references, which I really love about it. It's not a kid-friendly show, and that's what makes it so special. The style, backgrounds, and assets of the show are all really nice to look at. And Burger King might just be my favourite object show host ever. He's just so psychotic and funny, and it's absolutely wonderful to have him on screen. I won't talk about the other host. Village of Objects is a show that really gets better as it goes on. It starts off with your generic, nothing unique object show with your cliched cast, but it really gets better after episode 5. And then it ends off on an alien invasion which permanently kills off some of the contestants, while the others have to save the world. What a unique object show. What's really cool is the show has something for everyone. It changes between 6 hosts over the entirety of it, and also it switches to an island, to a village, to the rooftop of a village, to outer space, to an alien ship. I watched about 5 episodes, then stopped watching, then I watched the rest, and after realizing it really picked up, I watched all of it in one go. Seriously, the story is super engaging, and what I also really like about the show is even if a contestant is eliminated, they can still get screen time. They show a lot of the eliminated and failed debuters after episode 10 interacting with the rest of the contestants, so that's really cool. I'm glad it's getting the attention it deserves, and if you still haven't watched it, go check it out. I feel really awful not putting one of the episodes of the finale at the top, but I feel like episode 15, Electric Wall, just edges it out for the introduction of the whole alien thing and setting up the finale. Honestly, I never expected to see a Russian object show, and especially not one that would make my top 15. But here we are at Contest for Millions of Thousands? Honestly, Kratky is 4 done right. Kratky is random, ominous, and goofy instead of just kill people, be weird. This show's animation might only just be beaten by Teapot, because the animation is amazing. I can imagine that some of the characters in this show would be really hard to animate. Also, the visuals are amazing. It has my favourite backgrounds of any show, no question. I feel it just kind of set up Pot T for the main character role, but in the end I think that all characters are given a fair amount of screen time. I'd like to also point out that this show is really brutal, especially in the first challenge. People are getting ripped apart, burnt to death. It's pretty horrifying when you think about it, especially considering that these objects, up until episode 2, had no way of knowing that they would be recovered. It's pretty sad that the show is on hiatus, but I expect that in the future we'll probably get more episodes, which will be just as good as the first 2 of the reboot. If you're part of the English audience and are thinking, how am I supposed to watch this? Don't worry, there's English subtitles, so you should definitely go watch it. Don't be put off by the fact it's in a different language, because it's still just as good. I'd say that Objectio Flight is the better episode of the first 2, and although episode 2's character interactions are pretty good, episode 1's are good too, and the challenge is really fun to watch. Also, Knifey and Lightbulb are such an iconic duo, I love seeing them. And just missing out on the top 10 is Brawl of the Objects, which is a real shame because I really wanted to put it in the top 10, because it's one of the rare cases of an OG object show that still holds up to this day. In my opinion, it's the only object show that was perfectly able to replicate OG BFDI Season 1 style. The characters, the assets, the background music, and even the backgrounds themselves are all perfectly matching the old BFDI style, which makes it one of the best object shows out there. It has a generally small cast, and it manages to make all of the characters rememberable in some way, even the early boots. Except for Chocolatey, I don't really remember Chocolatey. I know that this is definitely a lot of people's #1 object show, including Webs Forever, which I can completely understand. The reason I don't have it as my highest is because I feel it shows how good object shows could be in 2014, and not 2024. Still though, it's impressive how it still holds up to this day as one of the most popular and influential object shows. Even though some of the episodes in the middle kind of feel more forgettable, each episode does have their own unique bits that make them stand out from the rest. I also feel like characters such as Baguette, Shelly, and Party Cat are some of the best object show characters up to date, and are definitely some of my favourites. Also, the fact that there was a whole second story inside of the show the whole time and nobody really noticed will always baffle me. It is genius how they concealed it. Brawl of the Objects 13 will always be the best Brawl of the Objects episode, and it's also probably the best object show finale ever, only rivaled by the Village of Objects finale. I still find it a bit unfair that Shelly lost, although it was the viewers voting, so I can't complain too much about that. And we're finally here, the top 10 shows, the best of the best. I feel like Burner is almost the opposite to 1, where 1 is a serious and realistic show where a bunch of objects get teleported to a place where they don't want to be. Burner is a goofy and light-hearted show where a bunch of silly contestants get teleported to a place and they're perfectly fine with it. And that's just what's so great about the show. It's a silly, non-serious show with really nice animation, really good aesthetics, and all of the characters stand out in a way. Seriously, it's devastating to see any of them get eliminated because they're all so good. And I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, but the aesthetic is just lovely. Even though the backgrounds are really simple, it's really unique, and I love it. I think Burner is one of those shows that I've never seen another show manage to perfect the vibe of. It's just so vibrant in all its characters, its location, its humor, and the animation. This is Sakui's best work. Definitely recommend a watch of it. Also, this was the last show that I put on my list, so if I'd watched something else just a little bit sooner, then this probably wouldn't have even been on this list. I'll give episode 2 the award of the best one, just because it's cool to see character interaction, and also seeing all of their hiding spots is pretty cool. It's cool to see a lot of locations around the map, even though it feels quite empty. Paper Puppets Take 2 is definitely one of those shows. Seriously, the writing quality definitely feels a lot like that of Inanimate Insanity, and the characters too. Despite the show not even being a lip-synced show, the animation is really incredible, and it's really pleasant to look at, especially with the style. Just the green, vibrant grass, the blue sky, and all of the background elements, the trees, are all also really cool. The show's style is so detailed, and that's what makes it really great. Even though some of the earlier episodes are really good in writing quality, it really starts to shine after the merge hits. The episodes get so good, and they're definitely worth the wait. Seriously, the production quality of the newer episodes definitely rivals Teapot and I, because they're just so good. Also, this is one of those shows where I don't think any of the characters are bad, because they all have their own redeemable traits and are really fun to watch. I especially like characters like Basketball, Plasma Ball, Chainsaw, and Sticky Notes. The show also has the power to make any boring challenge really interesting, and it especially shows in the newer episodes, which although having basic challenges, still manage to be really entertaining in their own ways. I know a lot of you will be surprised that it's not one of the newer episodes that makes the top episode of my list, which I completely understand because they're definitely better in animation. But I honestly think that episode 3 was the most entertaining to watch. Seeing all the characters explore an abandoned facility and seeing what happens to all of them is so cool. Seeing how they interact together, especially with the monsters, is just wonderful. I had the most fun watching this, and I wish we could get another episode like it. As Brown Scarf puts it, object show of the year, no debate. And I'd say that's fair. In only a 0 episodes, the show has proven itself to be some of the best work that OST has ever produced. The pixely art style is absolute eye candy, and it especially works for the object show that it's in. And seriously, some of the designs are so unique that I forget I'm watching an object show sometimes. The idea of a fantasy object show, which is sort of Dungeons & Dragons-esque, is just so unique, and it works so well. It's also one of those things, like Love of the Sun that I mentioned, I forget I'm watching an object show sometimes. The fact that as of now the show hasn't even reached 100,000 views is absolutely criminal. It deserves at least 1 million as of now. The interesting story, amazing visuals, and great voice acting all makes this one of the best shows I've ever seen. So I'll repeat myself, object show of the year. Oh yeah, I guess episode 0 is the best. This is where Inanimate Insanity peaks. I think this was the first show that really tried to do something different with the formula, because most shows up until this point were just... I'm bored!
Hi, you should join my new show, Object Cancer.
And even though II2 still used the competition format, it added some stuff such as contestant voting, world building, and hell, even songs. Even though I can't lie, the first half of season 1 was really good, it doesn't even compare to the second half. It has some notably really good ones, and some notably ones. And then came episode 8. This was a game changer. This changed II from being a fun and comedic show to an emotionally complex, wonderful show. So I want to give a short review of each episode past episode 8. So starting off, episode 8, this was the one that started it. It introduced Meatball, that was really cool. Episode 9, although being a filler episode, was one of the highlights of the season. It reintroduced Taco, and the character interaction really shines here. Episode 10 was also one of the best ones. Although being a simple challenge, it's really cool seeing how everything plays off. Also, this was the start of Suitcase's PTSD or something. Episode 11 was probably the best of the season. It introduced the contestant voting and it had that really cool elimination with Nickel and Balloon. The Afterlife and the Limelight segment was really cool. It's nice seeing a show with actual musicals in it. It's really interesting to see the Nickel, Balloon and Suitcase conflict play out in this episode, and it probably had the best elimination in any Object Show episode out there. II-12 was great too. Seeing how much II grew over the years was just really great. Also the paintbrush scene. 13 was cool too. Seeing everything that happened in Meatphone's past makes you kind of sympathize for him as a character. Also, Fan's elimination was probably the saddest of the season. I-14 didn't really do it as much for me though. I guess it was just too messy for my liking, although it was still good. Some of the highlights of the season are Lightbulb.
Well, I mean, it's probably best to cover the most ground we can in case it rains.
Wait.
The Meatball plot with Cobbs and the egg, and the Nickel and Balloon conflict. Overall, this series was a great experience, rooting for Lightbulb for the win. And I of course have to say that the two-parter of episode 11 was the best for the reasons that I've already stated. What a way to open your show. Bravo, Cheesy HFJ. The top 6 episodes of this list were really hard to put together, and honestly, I preferred season 1 of 1 to season 2, but I think I had to put it here. I know a lot of people have this as their favourite Object Show, and it's easy to see why. 1 is probably the best written and most detailed Object Show you can find. The show is purely a psychological horror, and sometimes the characters feel so real that you forget you're watching Object and not real humans interact. I mean, the psychology of 1 is so amazing that even non-OSC creators acknowledge and analyse it. The show is so detailed in areas that you wouldn't expect it to be, like Stone using actual sign language, or the episode Scatterbrain matching up to the lyrics of the song Scatterbrain. Like, the way that season 1 is actually a commentary on Object Shows nowadays is so absolutely genius that I didn't even recognise it until someone pointed it out to me. Also, despite its serious tone, the comedy in this show is peak. Like, seriously, it's baffling to me how Cheesy HFD manages to balance it so well. I would also say that not a single episode of this show is bad, and it especially ramps up towards the end. Each of them explores their own topics and then something that makes them special in their own way. This is truly the best show where people get transported out of their life to be put in a place where they don't want to be, where they have to do wacky adventures, all while trying to exit the place because they don't want to be there. Ugh. I would honestly say that while I was picking the episodes, there was a three-way tie for the best episode, being 1, 6, 8, and 9. The drowning scene in Blood Sol, I don't care, is one of the best of the whole show. The way it accurately represents drowning and Liam's panic is seriously intense and distressing to watch. It also shows off the purgatory bit for the first time. Plug Dream shows all of the contestants after Aerie mysteriously disappears. It's really interesting to see how they've coped and made a little civilization type thing while he's gone, although it must be pretty hard for the first batch not being able to get home. The fact that not a single word is said in this episode, yet it still says so much, is amazing. Liam is in the worst spot anyone could be right now. Everything he knows is gone, everyone thinks he's dead, and he's got nothing. The fact that the whole episode ties in with a song with the same name of the episode, Scatterbrain, is really genius on Cheesy's part, and it's really interesting to see the similarities play out. If you haven't watched 1 yet, go watch it right now, and it's really great that it's getting the attention it completely deserves. Now the top 5, the pillars of the object show community. And the Nightly Manor is definitely one of these. Like I said for the other shows like One and Love of the Sun, it really shows how creative you can get with object shows. It has some wonderful animation, although that's what can be expected from the creator of the Daily Object Show. It's a fairly short series, only being about 40 minutes in runtime, but it managed to get so much done in that runtime that it's pretty impressive. The first 3 episodes focus on 7 objects being trapped in a mansion where a killer slowly picks them off. I'll admit, there are some plot holes in the boot with weird pacing here, but it's still really fun to watch, and the reveal that it's GPS was pretty cool. This scene that I'm showing on screen right now is one of the best object show scenes I've seen yet. It's cool that they kind of showed a lot of every character in this series. Except for Ring, we don't really know anything about Ring. While episodes 1 and 2 are short but sweet, episode 3 is where the series really ramps off, ending up the murder mystery plot while only Top Hat and Sketchpad surviving. Episode 4 shows how Sketchpad and Top Hat are coping, which is, admittedly, not very well. They end up robbing a store while a really cool song is playing and trying to build a recovery center which ends up blowing up. I'd also like to say that the scene at the start of episode 4 is one of my favourite of the whole series, if not my favourite. The distorted music, while it looks like Sketchpad is drowning trying to reach speaker, is just so ominous and is executed really well. Episode 5 shows the backstory of Spray Paint and Mouse. The heist stuff is alright, I more cared about the spray paint and mouse stuff, so yeah, it was pretty cool. With all this said and done, I'd say that episode 4 is the best. It handled Top Hat's trauma really well, and the song part is really good. The writing and how it shows Top Hat and Sketchpad's deteriorating mental state is also really good. Fusion's best object show, I would say. Moth. Moth would be the last object show on this list that has been cancelled and has not received more than 1 season. So there's some fun trivia for you, I guess. After the length of that first episode, it should be no surprise as to why I've put this up here. Seriously, Moth 1 might be my favourite object show episode ever. Unlike some other shows like Inanimate Battle and BFB, it actually knows how to manage having a big cast. Seems like every character, who are all really good, is given a fair amount of screen time. Although there are a few screen time hogs like AirPods, so... And I mean, the art in this show is incredible. Just look at some of these images from the show. The fact that the show has consistent good writing, animation, and polished dialogue for 50 minutes is just really impressive. I also find it kind of funny how random some of the objects are, like sweet gum seeds, thimbles, smear frame, floral foam. It's just so random. It's like they're trying really hard to be original. Honestly, the challenge in episode 1 is the best object show challenge I've ever seen. The way it starts off seeming kind of complicated and it just being a free-for-all, it's really chaotic and it's fun to watch. But when they introduce the maze aspect, it gets so much better. Adding the lo-fi music mixed with the rain and seeing all the people trying to find their teams and make their way around the maze is just so cool. And then the showdown at the end, when there looks like there's going to be a showdown and then it just stops randomly, is really funny. Now, I know that there's 2 episodes, and the second one I haven't talked about, but in terms of best episode, is it even a question? It's the best one by far. It fits so much into its 15-minute length, and one of the most entertaining object show episodes ever. And the bronze medal for the best object show goes to the 3rd season of BFDI, IDFB. The fact that they tried to do a non-competition style for BFDI was just so cool, and it summoned one of the best BFDI episodes yet, possibly even the best. The amount of lore and content we got from this one 10-minute episode is probably more than all of BFB Post-Split combined. It raises so many questions like, why is the Science Museum there? Why did Evil Leafy appear for a second? What was that Bozo flashback? Why is Fiery locked up? The amount of lore they managed to add in just 1 episode is incredible, and now I'm sad that they've only had 1 episode. At least it's only on a hiatus, so we might see some new episodes in the future. I want to go over every aspect of why I like IDFB1, starting from the start. It starts off with Pencil, Ruby, and the rest of the Alliance filming their YouTube family vlog when Pencil realizes Ruby hasn't taken the lens cap off. Pencil gets depressed because Ruby reveals that she hasn't taken the lens cap off for all of their video diaries. I guess this was added to explain why BFDIA is cancelled, or was cancelled, but I don't know. Does that mean Ruby was recording all of BFDIA? I'd say this is a good opening to the episode for at least trying to add context to what happened, and it's cool to see the Alliance back. We then get to see some more familiar faces like Pin, Fries, and Bommy, although noticeably, Pin has lost her colour and has gotten some new limbs. Fries is growing some potatoes for himself due to the fact that all the others have gotten burnt or eaten, and he's using Tennis Ball's brand Grow-taters because normal potatoes can't grow here because of the lack of sun. Yeah, Free Smart's doing something out now. And then we get the best scene of the episode, the Science Museum. TB and GB go into Yoland Abandoned Science Museum, where we get a lot of lore. Since I'm too lazy to explain it all, here's all of the lore. After Golf Ball insisting that they leave, Tennis Ball takes a wall teleporter and shows it to the other contestants. They realize that they can use it to free all of the contestants from the TLC. They set out to the LOL, and they leave it up to the viewers to vote who they should release. Now, I've just got one question after all this. Where the hell is Gelatin? And we're back to 1. Even though 1 might not have been my favourite, I have to put this up here. Season 2 got all of the problems from Season 1 and fixed it. This season it just focused on Liam and Bryce trying to stop Aerie and take down 1. And wow, was it an emotional roller coaster. Episodes 10 to 13 follow Liam finding Bryce and convincing him to run around the country looking loosely for clues about Aerie. And then there was episode 14. You see, at the end of episode 13, both Liam and Bryce were struck by lightning and killed. This sends them both to the room we saw in 1-6. After flicking through the radio things, they eventually come across the place where Stone was from. However, upon finding nothing, they leave and return to San Francisco. I would in fact say that the final 3 episodes of 1 are the Object Show community's final 4 episodes of Breaking Bad. 116 finally gives us insight on how the other people in the plane are doing, although we find out that hardly any of them remain as most of them have been eliminated. At the end of the episode, Soda Bottle is teleported back to the plane by Aerie. 117 shows Backpack going to the place where Aerie lives and finally meeting him for the first time. Their interactions in this episode are really good, and the scene where Backpack falls and all the sticky notes get ripped up is one of the most tragic scenes in Object Show history. 118 was probably one of the most polarizing Object Show episodes, because when it first released, a lot of people hated it because it didn't have Backpack and Aerie teaming up to stop this, bring everyone back, and Backpack didn't at the end say, "Hey Aerie, maybe the real HFJ1 were the tomatoes we crushed along the way." And I was one of them. But the more I look back, the more I love 1's ending. Not everything gets a happy ending, and it just adds a little more realism to the show. About an hour before I've recorded this audio, Cheesy HFJ just uploaded a new video. It's called 1 Investigations, and it's looking like it's going to be a new mini-series, so I'm glad we're still getting 1 content to this day. I know a lot of you might think that I'd put self-titled or universe modulation at the top, but I'd say that 117, You Move, I Send, it's the best episode of the show. For the scene with the sticky notes and actually meeting Aerie for the first time makes it an absolutely amazing episode. I know a lot of you would think that I would have put this at top 1, which is completely understandable, but I feel like there's one show that's just made the most impact on the community, and I have to put it above. 1 will probably still be in many people's hearts for how amazing the series is. Thank you, TZHFJ. By now I've talked about 49 shows over the runtime of 1 hour, 3 minutes and 7 seconds. Thank you guys so much for watching to this point. We've gone from Object Mayhem to HFJ1. And that's it, this video took me so long to edit and put together. So you could like, I don't know, subscribe or something, whatever those YouTubers say. And I know some people won't like what I put for number 1 and say like, oh that's too basic, or I came here for something better. But there's one show that's clearly done much more for the community and has inspired so many people. And that show is...
Yeah, I know. She was so surprised. Really?
Where to even begin with BFDI? This was the show that started it all. The community wouldn't be anything if this show hadn't existed. Hell, you wouldn't even be watching this video if BFDI 1 hadn't released. And it may not have the best storytelling, or animation, or even characters, but it has the most charm, the most nostalgia, and most important, stumbling across BFDI and binge watching it was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. It's seriously amazing how 2 10-year-old kids have made so many people's childhoods and inspired so many people. Rewatching season 1 will be something that I do all the time just because of how nice it is to watch. It's great how it doesn't take itself seriously and just as a series for fun. It makes it so much more enjoyable to watch that way. It has all the iconic characters, episodes, best object show vote ever, with the announcer. It was the one that introduced the viewer voting concept. It was the one that introduced the objects as characters concept. It's the one that introduced the show on YouTube concept. Everything was created by this show, and it's so special. It is one of the best, if not the best, YouTube web series you can find, and probably the most unique too. It's so nice to see it gain more popularity and improve over the years. We started off at 7 votes, and now we're up to hundreds of thousands in some of the BFDIA episodes. I would split the show into 3 periods, which I'm going to rank now. I would honestly say that the worst is the late era. It's just some of the episodes felt rushed, especially with BFDI 24 and 25 being some of the worst of the season. I would, however, say that it does have some standoff good episodes like BFDI 17, 18, and 21. I would say in second place would be the Legacy era. Some of the episodes don't hold up as well, but it's the one that started BFDI, and some of the episodes in this period are really good, like BFDI 2, 6, and 8. Although their lack of understanding of writing made some of the episodes like BFDI 5 and 7 a bit boring. I would say that the best era is the Improvement era. It has some of the best episodes of the season. It's all really fun to watch, and the points element was really cool. I really hope to see some more shows that have points element, so it was one of the best periods of BFDI ever. Picking a best episode from this era is hard, but I'd have to settle with BFDI 50, which is also Carrie's favourite. I like how the characters got to choose their own challenge, and I liked how the vomit bag challenge was really chaotic, and the tackle challenge was just quite chill. Overall, BFDI is the show that started everything, and will live on for me as the best object show to ever exist.